The P.O.P. podcast, let's go. The P.O.P. podcast, let's go. The P.O.P. podcast starts now.
Hello and welcome to the P.O.P. podcast, your source for insights and innovations in orthodontics, brought to you by Premier Orthodontic Practices. I'm your host, Jason Sirotin. Each episode, we dive deep into some of the leading orthodontists who are not just practitioners, but pioneers in the field. Today, we're exploring the formation and function of P.O.P., a collective designed to elevate and evolve orthodontic practices. Joining us today are four distinguished orthodontists. I've been hanging out with them for a while. I think that's a little much, but they're members of the P.O.P. community. We have Dr. Scott Nord, who practices and can be found online at utahvalleybraces.com. Next, we have Dr. Joe Feller from bountifulortho.com. And then joining him, we have Dr. Blake Maxfield. Details of his practice are available at drmaxfield.com. And finally, Dr. Bryan Horsley, horsleyorthodontics.com. Gentlemen, thank you. How are you today?
Doing great.
Awesome.
Great, yeah. Good to be here.
Well, let's jump right in. Who can kind of tell me what P.O.P. is?
So P.O.P., Jason, the four of us over the years have been friends and colleagues and each run our own individual practices. We've known each other for, decade or two, at least a couple decades in most cases, and have similar styles and similar size practices. And each in our own way kind of went down the road of the potential DSO model. Like a lot of our friends, we each had our own experience with that and thought we'd play that out and see where that took us, and took our time to really understand the ins and outs of that, the advantages, disadvantages of that, and separately came to our own conclusion that it wasn't a good fit for what we were about at that time. And then as a group, started to kind of think through what are the advantages a DSO model has that we don't have in our private practice on our own island, we like to say, as solo practitioners, and what are some things maybe we could take from that and make our own without selling our practices and giving up all the autonomy and all the choices and giving our team to somebody else. And I think that's what started this whole process, Jason, is similar-minded doctors who had a vision of what we thought we could make if it worked out. And we worked hard as a group to kind of put this all together and have met a number of times. And eventually this blossomed into something that we're pretty proud of and excited about, that we feel is really good for our practices and for a lot of other private practices who may not want to do the DSO model, but want a lot of the advantages that come from a group size. That's, I think, what started it.
Great job, Joe.
Thanks, Bryan.
Dr. Maxfield, what was your story of wanting and not wanting to be part of a DSO and wanting to find an alternate path? What are the advantages in your mind?
I actually went pretty far down that road looking into the DSO world, the OSOs. It was enticing in a lot of ways. But I think ultimately, one of the things that scared me the most, I hated the idea of everyone seeing my numbers, having this comparison thing. I always want to do what's best for the patients always. I don't want to do something for a quota. And it just felt a little weird, like being a part of a group, having someone tell me what quota I need to meet. And I just love that we formed this because, we get a lot of the advantages you could get with the DSO OSO, but now we're not under quotas and everything. And we're just doing what's best for the patients always. We're not trying to get a start all of a sudden. So I just love that aspect. I felt like there would be a lot of stress all of a sudden in my life if I joined a DSO, and this way we can maintain our autonomy. Nothing about our practices change. I can attest to it. We've been doing this now for a year or so, and I don't know what the revenue is for these guys, these other founders. These are three of the guys I respect the most in our industry, but we still have autonomy. I don't know what's going on in their practices, but I know I'm just doing what's best for the patients every day, and I can sleep a lot better at night knowing that.
Dr. Horsley, you seem like that you guys are all kind of cut from the same cloth. Would you say that there's a good amount of guys and gals out there that have these same feelings about kind of where the business is going and where they want their own practices to go?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt Just like Joe had mentioned before, the four of us have known each other for quite a few years. In fact, I knew Joe from dental school, and Blake and Scott and I all worked together for a period of time as well. So we have a lot of the same approach to things. But yes, I feel like there are a lot of people in the exact same situation that we're in, especially as it applies to the DSO model. Just looking at some of the options and all of that. But it's been interesting seeing some of our colleagues actually that have gone that route have not had everything turn out the way they hoped it would. But yes, I think there are a lot of orthodontists in our same situation that feel like they're kind of on their own island. They don't have a group of individuals to share ideas, cut down costs and things like that. So,
Scott, what do you think in terms of where you're at with your practice wanted to drive you in and make that change and go towards a new model?
One of the things that's been amazing with this group, like we've mentioned before, we're great friends. We've been friends for years. And as we've kind of established this group, and this probably started a little bit in COVID, I would say too, just networking with these three guys here that we're on the podcast with, and just having a chance to share ideas, best practices, bounce ideas off each other. I mean, this started back with the PPP loans and all the stuff they were going through in COVID, and just, hey, what are you guys doing here? We all practice in Utah. We got shut down for 6 weeks where we couldn't practice. Hey, what are you guys doing? How are you navigating this? So we're just constantly in contact. And then because the follow-up to that, as we form this P.O.P group, we've been, almost in weekly, if not monthly, contact with each other. We're sharing ideas. So what Bryan was saying, one of the things I really like about the aspect as far as the potential of this group is having this, it's almost a networking effect where we can share ideas. You're not on an island. You could put your staff in contact with other people's staff. For example, I know my office manager and Dr. Horsley's, they speak all the time about stuff and they share ideas about, different challenges that we have within our practices and how to solve those. Part of our vision for this group is not only to help cut overhead, but also work a little bit on clinical efficiency and clinical tips, but also to share ideas on how to practice, things that are working, things that aren't working. And that's an important point too. I think a lot of us have ideas of different things we want to try in our practice. And you throw it out to a few of your buddies and they're like, yeah, I tried that 2 years ago. Don't do it. It's a disaster. And so it saves you a little heartburn on that side as well, where you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. So that's part of where we're trying to take this as well. And I think that will be a really compelling and important part of what P.O.P does.
It sounds like what you're creating too amongst this is a mastermind, like a place where people can get together and really use the power of many to really improve their practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's power in numbers is what we kind of found as we looked at the DSO model, and we're trying to replicate some of those advantages. But one of those advantages, like we mentioned before, is you're not on an island. You can use the leverage of the group, both in terms of buying power, but also in being able to network and put your staff in contact with other staff members who have.
Jason, can I touch on real quick?
Please.
So, because I think that's super important. Like the DSO model, which again, we don't have anything against doctor. A lot of our friends have done the DSO model. So if that fits for you, that's great. But for us, we didn't feel like it was a good fit. But the things that idea that, at least as far as I can tell, a lot of it's cutting costs and, buying power. And we want to have that as well. We like that aspect. But I really think for sure the magic of this group is much more than that. And we kind of discovered that over time. Like there are things that, and I feel like we're a successful practice. Between my two offices, we do, over 1,000 starts a year. So I feel like we've got some good things going on with me and the other two doctors. But there are things that each of these offices do that when we meet together and I hear about it, I'm like, that's genius. Like, why are we not doing that? That makes so much sense. That's so much better than what we're doing. And it's not one or two things, Jason. It's been like multiple things that are super valuable for me, whether it's on the marketing aspect or the HR aspect or the practice management aspect, or how to have an associate and do it successfully, or how to run a practice without an associate. Like there are so many things that candidly wouldn't have happened for our group 10 to 15 years ago because we weren't in practice long enough. But now that we've been in practice 10, 15, 20 years, we've made mistakes and we've learned from our mistakes and we've evolved. And that's what I think is super valuable with this group, is all of these gems and pearls truly that we can take from each other that really allow our practices to be better and more effective and more efficient and make our days go better. That's what I found is the genius of this group for me.
It's like all of the advantages of a business partnership without the, some of the harsh realities of partnership. You get
Absolutely.
to like the best part.
But I think it's a challenge. You look at the four of us, all of us have very successful practices, right? And there's a reason that we were successful, right? There's been so much blood, sweat, and tears that have been put into creating successful practices. And what happens is, we're seeing this with some of our colleagues. Then you have these DSOs that come in and they talk about that they're going to provide a lot of autonomy and all of this, and it's not going to change the way you practice. But that hasn't been the case for several of our colleagues. And then all of a sudden they're making decisions for your successful practice that now makes it so your practice isn't as successful. And nor do you have the happiness that you had before because you're not the captain of your ship. Another advantage of what we've done is we're providing all of these amazing resources, so more resources than what these DSOs and OSOs are providing. And yet you get complete autonomy and ownership of your practice. And also along with kind of the networking, we have a few things in place. We have a Facebook group that we formed. So we'll have that to where we can openly communicate about, hey, we're having this challenge with staff, or we're having this challenge with marketing. Has anybody figured this out? Or merchant processing fees. Anyone figured out how to get those down? The other thing that we'll do every year is we'll have an annual meeting where we'll come together and we'll have time to share best practices with, in person with each other. But also help troubleshoot some of the issues that we're having. So we're super excited about that. That's coming up this next year at the beginning of the year.
Love it. Dr. Maxfield.
I don't know why I'm looking off into the corner, but I am. It's driving me.
Oh, we thought you were looking at the right place. I didn't notice it, but now I will only notice it.
Like this is me looking straight at the camera.
What do you mean,
I
Bryan?
can see like half of Brian's face, but that's fine.
Dr. Maxfield, I saw you a couple of times try to say something, so I wanted to come back to you.
Oh, I just wanted to point out, like, this would have been heaven sent for me, a group like this when I was like, especially earlier on in my career. It's amazing because one of the main stresses when you're growing a practice, I'm a few years behind these guys, but I was always jealous because like I felt like they were getting better deals than I was, right? Like it was and I would spend a lot of stress and energy thinking about that. I'm like, should I bring up that I know Horsley's probably getting a lot, like his brackets for less than me? It's just like one of these things. And like, I'm so grateful for like, finally we're making these companies be transparent with us, right? Like there was so many weird hidden fees. And like, as a young orthodontist, you just kind of have to just deal with it. But like, I would love this group earlier on. I mean, obviously now it's beneficial in so many ways, but I just love the idea of just stresses, focusing more on your patients, not so much on the weird negotiating transparency crap.
I love that. And I think it's a brilliant transition to where I wanted this to go next, which is I want to know your stories. Can you tell me, Dr. Maxfield, tell me about your story of coming up?
Yeah, no, I'd love to chat about it. So my father's an orthodontist, so I grew up with it. I always wanted to do it deep down inside, but it was funny because I got kind of pressured into medicine. My grandfather's one of the most famous heart surgeons in the world. So I always had this expectation on me, so I always got A's. I was always supposed to go into medicine. I still remember talking to my grandfather one day and I was like, I finally just was honest with myself. And I'm like, I think I want to do orthodontics, not like medicine. And he was like, I guess you can help people doing that. He's like, oh yeah. Orthodontics. Well, I save lives every day, but anyway, I'm partially joking, but he totally was happy for me. But in the end, like it was always my passion. My dad would just go around and he had a weird, stupid little saying he always said whenever we saw someone, we knew it was his patient because right after he'd be like, oh, there's a grateful patient, like I always looked at smiles because of him. But then I graduated orthodontics in 2009. So it was an interesting time to graduate because, my dad's practice wasn't like what it was. So he didn't really have room for me. Luckily, there was basically one person in Utah hiring at the time, and that was Dr. Horsley. So I was able to get great mentorship from both Dr. Horsley and my father, and was able to kind of start my own practice just because my dad never really had the room. So we kind of did this weird hybrid thing, but it ended up just kind of being a startup, and then eventually I bought them out. But I've remained solo practitioner. I have 2 brand new offices. I've actually, spent some time investing in buildings, and I think that helps a lot. One of my offices in Cottonwood Heights has a basketball hoop in the waiting room. One of my offices in Taylorsville has a mini golf course, and obviously those are a little gimmicky and probably not needed, but it's a little bit marketing, but it's more like the only reason it really works is because it's me, right? Those are what I'm passionate about. And I think people need to do what they love so that work's fun. I love what I do. We've grown over the years. I really owe a lot to this group. I'm surprised I went as far down the DSO road, but I do want to say that I do have friends that are happy in that road. I know for myself, I've felt so at peace. So for me in my stage of life right now, I don't think it would have decreased my stresses. And it's all about, for me, quality of life and decreased stress. I've got 5 young kids at home that are demanding. And, when I'm at home, I don't want to be stressed about work. So,
well, if you want to check out Maxfield Orthodontics, make sure you go check out drmaxfield.com and you can see that hoop, which is awesome. I want to shoot on it someday. I think there's a good pass to Dr. Horsley, seeing how you got your start over there. Let's figure out, Dr. Horsley, how you got so good at tech.
Oh, that's just a low blow. One of my many weaknesses is tech, but I grew up in a little small town in Idaho. My dad was a mortician, and he actually always felt like if he could do it all over again, he would have done something in medicine. So as a child, I always thought I'm going to go the medical route, similar, I think, to Blake a little bit with the medicine. And so kind of went that route, went to college. In college, I took a pre-med course. In that pre-med course, part of that course was to shadow doctors. And every doctor that I shadowed said if they could have done it all over again, they would have done dentistry. And I'm like, really? Dentistry of all things? Like, it just was not on my radar at all. So I thought the next semester I'd take a pre-dental course, and I went and observed a few dentists. And I actually observed an orthodontist, comedically enough, became one of my competitors just down the street from me, later on. But went into his practice. He had this board of before and afters just pinned next to each other. And I saw that difference that made. You could just see it in their eyes and their confidence. You could truly, you could feel that change of confidence. And so I'm like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. I've got 2 practices. I bought both practices from a guy who'd been practicing for 40 years. He had practices in both South Jordan, Utah and Tooele, Utah. When I bought those practices from him, he had 6 employees. We're celebrating our 20 years of orthodontics this year. So we've gone from 6 employees and being in a little space of 1,400 square feet. We have 55 employees now. I have 3 doctors that work with me, and we've been truly, truly blessed. And like I said, it's been fun with this group because Joe and I went to dental school together. Blake and Scott and I all got to work together. And so it's been fun over the years to learn from each other and have that camaraderie and be able to bounce ideas off each other.
That's a massive practice. I haven't heard of that large of practice. Congratulations to all you guys. I mean, these are incredible stories, and you all are passing it off so brilliantly to one another because you went to school with Dr. Feller. So Dr. Feller, take us through your journey. And it better connect to Dr. Nord.
Yeah, my dad's a general dentist. And so growing up, I knew what I did not want to do. And that was, I did not want to be a dentist because that's what my dad did. That's boring. So I went to college thinking I was pre-med like everybody else in this group, seemingly. And then partway through, I really similar experience to my friend Bryan. I shadowed some doctors and I had a similar experience. Not one of them said, this is the great job. You're going to love it. They all kind of said, And then I started to watch what my dad did. And I realized, he had great relationships, like lifelong relationships. And he had a great lifestyle. And so I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to do the dental route. So I went to the University of Louisville, met Dr. Horsley there. He was one of my mentors there, has been forever. I'm just riding his coattails through my life. So, but in dental school, I really also kind of fell in love with ortho. So as you and I were talking, Jason, I went out to Massachusetts and went to residency there. And in residency, I was not sure what to do. And I found a practice for sale or partnership, A doctor was looking for a partner, and And I thought he was going to bring me in. And about May, due to graduate in July, he called me. And I remember where I was in Boston. And he called me and said, "Hey, I don't have room for you. There's no spot for you here." And I had 3 kids and a load of student loan debt, and I was terrified. And so what I did is I found a practice in rural Wyoming. A cousin of mine, Dr. Feller, which I found fascinating. And so he and I formed a partnership for a little while. And then I started a practice here in Bountiful, Utah in 2005. I started it from scratch. I had no patients and nothing. And so we have 2 practices now, and I have 2 doctors I work with. And honestly, what we do every day, like to Brian's point, it's pretty awesome, and I love it. Yesterday, we took braces off a few patients, and we put braces on a few patients. And I told my wife end of the day, I said, today was a great day. Like today, everybody was awesome. Everybody treated me like I was a king, even though I'm not. And I just thought, what a reward we do every day. And I want there to be a place for private practice doctors. And I think there's a place for corporate dentistry and corporate orthodontics and DSO groups, but I hope there's a place for private practitioners. My oldest son is starting at University of Louisville Dental School this fall, the same place Brian and I went to. It's now my oldest boy. And if he decides to do orthodontics, I want him to have a chance to come back and do what I do every day. Like, I love working with my team. I love taking care of my team. I love working with my patients. I really do love the things we do day after day. And it really is a privilege. I think it's the greatest job in the world. And you've mentioned that, Jason, before we started. Like, how many patients do we see a day that are like, I want to be an orthodontist someday? And that's super important, that they have a place they can land as a private practitioner and still feel like they can make it and have the advantages that we've had.
That's incredible. And if you want to learn more about Dr. Feller's office, go to bountifulortho.com. And I forgot to mention Dr. Horsley's office. Make sure you go to horsleyorthodontics.com, where you can learn all about that. And I have to say, your office from the exterior looks incredible. And it's conveniently placed in the middle of a giant neighborhood. Is there a neighborhood right across the street?
The unfortunate thing, well, on the backside, it's a retirement neighborhood, so we don't
they
get
don't need braces.
Dentures do not need to be straight most often. But yes, across the street, we've got a huge, vast neighborhood there. Yeah.
Well, beautiful practices. Now, I'm a little disappointed, Dr. Feller, you did not toss it properly over to Dr. Nord, but nonetheless, we'll go over to Dr. Nord and get his story. Dr.
Joe,
Nord,
just no connection, Joe. No ties between us. Huh?
Scott, the only connection doesn't seem appropriate for this setting. So when the time comes, we can discuss.
Yeah, this is funny because it's kind of a similar thread with these guys. The interesting thing is you can see a lot of different starts, different models of how practices start within our group. So my start, I came, just like these guys, I was pre-med my first year at University of Utah. They left to Germany. I was there for 2 years, and one of the guys I got to know there was a military orthodontist. He was on the Army base in Darmstadt. And my plan was to be a pediatrician. And as I talked to him, about what he does, I thought, man, it's the same demographic, but the kids are healthy. It's more fun. It's creating smiles. And I thought that sounds like a pretty good, pretty good alternative to what I was thinking about. Let me check that out. When I got back home, checked that out a little bit more and thought, yeah, definitely that's a better route. Not that I couldn't have been happy as a pediatrician, but definitely in retrospect, that was the right decision for me. So I switched to pre-dental coming back, went dental school out at University of Pennsylvania, residency at Temple University in Philadelphia as well. And then trying to find a practice to come back here to Utah. Now, Joe, he started a practice from scratch. I was pretty nervous about doing that. There's quite a few orthodontists here, and I was having a hard time finding a practice. So I came really close to joining a practice up in Meridian, Idaho. But I was home on spring break, called around. Back in the day, they had a little book of all the members of the American Association of Orthodontists. So you kind of see when people graduated. So I'm calling all the old people, like, hey, do you have anybody that you know of, any buddies that are retiring or looking for somebody? And I happened to call a guy, and Dr. Christiansen, and he had sold 5 years earlier to his son-in-law, John Pobance, up in Ogden, his main practice. But he had a satellite practice down in Orem, Utah. And so I met up with him, and it was fairly small. It was, we would see patients 6 days a month, and they were fairly light days. Now, Dr. Chris is awesome. He's a big time morning person. So, like a normal conversation with him would be, hey, Dr. Chris, how did your weekend go? He's like, it was awesome. I slept in. I wandered down to the hot tub at about 4:30 and soaked for about a half an hour. And then, so he's up early. So this is a little bit of an anomaly, but we'd start seeing patients at 5:30 in the morning. So we'd see patients for a few hours. We'd have a breakfast break. Then we'd see some patients a little bit more. Then we'd have a lunch break. Then we'd see patients again. So, but the unique thing with that model was in those 12 hours from like 5:30 to 5 or whatever it was, we see like 25 patients. So between the two of us, we have like 2 patients an hour, and so you kind of go at the end of residency, as chief resident, I wrote my master's thesis. You're doing all these, we call them comps, but you have to do these workups. I'm sure everybody does that, where you do all the records workups to hand off cases to other residents and stuff. And it's just a busy, busy time. And then all of a sudden you're working 6 days a month, for my half, it was 1 patient an hour, and it was just like the brakes hit. But anyway, long story short, I worked with Dr. Chris for about a year and a half, bought him out, and then kind of gone from there. Since then, we've opened a practice in Eagle Mountain. So we have 2 offices, kind of similar to what Blake's doing. I work alone, I'm solo, and have 2 offices, and we the whole staff, we bounce between the 2 offices together.
That's awesome. And if you guys want to check out Dr. Nord's office, go to Nord Orthodontics. It's UtahValleyBraces.com. Go check it out now. Again, another beautiful office. You guys all have just gorgeous places. So
hey, I do have to say this too, Jason. Can I throw this in too? So I'm part of Horsley's lineage. I was his first associate. So I've always told him, so I was very first. So he cut his teeth on having an associate with me. So the good news with that, I told Bryan, there's nowhere to go but up from here. Like your associate's going to get better as you go. So Blake replaced me. So he's 2.0.
Big upgrade. Big upgrade for sure.
It was awesome because, it's so fun when Blake and I overlapped. I'd sit down to see a patient. And they say, hey, can I see the young, cute guy instead of you? And so, so when Blake says at the first of the podcast, I'm a little, younger than these other guys, it just felt like an old joke. And it brings back a little PTSD to when he was replacing me and people wanted to see him instead of me. But that's okay, Blake. It's fine. I'm not bitter.
That's amazing. Who is best served to take us through the overall vision of P.O.P and discuss the specific problems that you guys are trying to solve?
Early on, we were all talking quite a bit as we went down the DSO route. We were all looking at the same company. I think Blake kicked the tires on a few others, but as we were kind of talking about that option, we were in conversation quite a bit with each other. Ultimately, when we decided not to do it and join that DSO, but kind of finding out some of the advantages that they had as a group, we just had a text going with the 4 of us, and we said, hey, let's get together and talk and just kind of figure this out. So we met at a restaurant in Sandy called Carver's, just a steakhouse, and sat down that night and said, hey, what can we do? Like, how can we leverage some of those advantages that these guys are finding, but do it on a practice level, kind of where we're at, where we're individual. Maybe we can be affiliated, but not necessarily bound as a group in a legal way. And from there, that's where this kind of started rolling. And so we started out, we approached our vendor who does our brackets and asked them, hey, look, we know that these DSOs are getting brackets at a quite a bit less expensive price. But with that model, you have these doctors that have been loyal to you for years, and anybody who does brackets, they know it's really hard to get orthodontists to change bracket systems. It's a big commitment for practice, and we tend to be really loyal. But in the DSO model, what happens is, once that person sells to DSO, they might stay for 3 to 5 years. They might stay longer if it's a good fit for them, but generally they have a contract to stay, 3 to 5 years or whatever it might be. And then if they leave, there's no loyalty to that company anymore, right? Whoever they bring in, they've got their own brackets that they prefer or like. And so we approached our bracket vendor and said, hey, look, we've been loyal to you for decades. Why do we pay more? We're going to be here. We're here with you. And through that, we met some of the higher ups in the company and we're able to get an agreement in place, and also the ability to extend that pricing to other practices. And that's really a lot of what we kind of found as we went through that DSO model. Is we found, okay, they take these practices, they package them together, they negotiate better fees, they take some of their services, including like accounting and insurance processing and some of the HR stuff, and they centralize that. But there's some exciting stuff on the table that we're working on for sure.
How does somebody get involved with P.O.P and take advantage of like what you guys are doing?
Yeah, it's fairly simple. Our website is pop-ortho.com. So you just go on there. There's essentially an intake form, but you fill out some information. We'll contact you, kind of to walk you through things. I mean, it's not a really cumbersome process, to be honest. Like I said, it's meant to be an affiliated group, but not to commingle our practices. We want to have autonomy both from a legal standpoint, but also from a liability standpoint. So it's very clear in some of the things. There's a few documents to sign for sure, but it's mostly just an affiliate agreement that keeps all of our practices separated so we're not, commingled.
We talked about so many different things, but I think one of the things that people will really grasp onto, and what I've noticed through the conversation, is how important mentorship is to you guys. Are there going to be opportunities for that to be part of the group as well?
For sure. I'd love to touch on that, Jason. There are people who fly around the world to go visit Dr. Horsley's practice and, to kind of learn some of the things that, Dr. Nord and I learned. It's invaluable, stuff like that. And we plan, not just Dr. Horsley, all of us would love to serve in that capacity. And because really in the end, anyone who joins this, besides being a private practice orthodontist being the requirement, we just want people who really clinically care about their patients, right? That really value results. I think that's where we want to separate ourselves as a group. And I think, mentorship is one of the main goals we plan on implementing in this group. Because in the end, like, this is our job. We love what we do, but really you have to be a good orthodontist, all the gimmicky marketing, everything. But in the end, you want to know that you're giving everyone the best smile possible. And that's what really makes this job fun. That's what makes owning a business fun, is just helping people with those smiles. And we want those to be not only as good as they can be, but as efficient as they can be. And there are so many ways of being efficient these days, not only in the clear aligner industry, but also in just with the brackets. And we'd love to share some of our pearls on that, and just make everyone, we know braces aren't going away, even though clear aligners obviously grow every year. But, there are so many advantages to the fixed appliances, and we just know we need to be very efficient for that to be competitive in the future.
Where do you guys see the group a year from now? How, where do you think it's headed? And what are you going to be able to do as you grow? Is that a big thing? As you grow, will you have the opportunity to do even bigger things?
For sure. I do want to, real quickly, I want to make sure Dr. Horsley gets a chance to, we do have a goal of an annual meeting. And if any of you guys have ever, talk about gifts and talents, Dr. Horsley and planning events is just incredible and always goes big. So I'd love for him to address that, but also, address some of the other things that we have planned.
We will be doing an annual meeting. We have an annual meeting coming up, our first annual meeting. So to kick off this whole thing is going to be the end of January of this next year, so 2025. Super exciting. We're lining up some fantastic speakers. So there's going to be some incredible content as it pertains to clinical stuff. We also have some incredible speakers too for practice management and marketing and insurance and things like that. So we're super, super excited about this meeting. It's going to be incredible. We also have an exciting special guest that will be coming one night. We have a world-class performer that we have coming in. So we'll leave that kind of suspenseful for people to find out. But it's going to be in Deer Valley. So world-class skiing, some of the best skiing in the world is right there at that location. Not only will it be fun to be able to come together and learn together and to create lasting friendships and relationships, but also on top of that, we have incredible skiing where we'll be able to have the opportunity to be able to bond that way. This meeting is going to be that there's one part of it that is completely directed at practice pearls. And I mentioned that before, but it's going to be a practice pearl sharing session where we talk about some of the challenges and some of the successes we've had in our practice. And once again, there's some of us that are farther along in the process than others, in our career to help some of these younger orthodontists. So looking forward to that. It's going to be an incredible meeting. And I really do feel like some of the biggest value in what this group is going to provide is that this fellowship of colleagues to where we can be there for each other's resources. Plus, all of us can also say, besides that, we have saved so much money this year being part of this group as well. And that will continue to get better and better as our group has more leverage and as we get larger and we bring on more suppliers. So exciting.
For that, Blake and Bryan are going to do a break off where they break dancing against each other as one of the events. I mean, this is like, don't miss it.
And it sounds like Beyonce is going to be there.
It's Park City.
You let the cat out of the bag. Yep, that's our special guest.
That's amazing, guys. Yeah.
When you talk about where I think we're going. So if I could just real quick, what I found interesting with this group is for a long time, we focused on, and it's still a key part of P.O.P. We focused on, how can we get some of the buying power that these DSOs have? And we focused first on our ortho supply company. We all use the same one. We use the same bracket, same system. We love it. And what I was surprised by is when we finally got our faces in front of some key people in that company, they actually made a deal with us, and they made an awesome deal with us. So that kind of started us realizing, hey, what do we have here when we combine? And now, as we've gathered in dozens of other practices, every time we go to these companies, we have 2 dental suppliers in place now, and they're giving us killer deals. And honestly, it's a frustration for an orthodontist when you're like, how much am I paying for gloves? And how much am I paying for sterilization stuff? And we're saving thousands and thousands and honestly tens of thousands of dollars a year with these deals we have, these agreements we have in place. And so I see that continue to get better and better with the more practices we bring in. But that really is only one arm. I love what the things that have been mentioned. Like there's the other arm with mentoring. There's the other arm with, this awesome meeting that Bryan's going to host. We really do plan on, having ways they can do world-class practice management solutions and world-class, mentoring. And at the end, like Blake said, it's super important for us to provide, we want to have healthy sized practices, but whatever that looks like for you is different. Like Bryan's practice size is bigger than most of us would even dream of. And candidly, maybe even want to have, because it's just, that's who he is. He can do it. I don't think I could do that. And Blake and Scott right now are solo practices. So it's not about a certain size practice. It's more about, are you happy with what you're doing? Are you providing the level of care that you're happy with? And at the end of the day, honestly, we all make good livings. We're all going to retire whether we do it DSO or not. And so are you happy with your day to day? And do you see a future where you're going to be happy the next 5 or 10 years? And I really think this gives each of us and every other private practitioner that wants to be part of it an opportunity to do that and still maximize all the benefits of what they have, but take advantage of these things that we have never been a part of because we aren't part of a DSO or a corporation.
You can't buy happiness, you can't buy freedom, and you can't buy peace of mind. It's the things that people forget about. And I think you lose a lot of that when you give up your freedoms to make your own decisions and that autonomy. And what you guys remind me of is this, Voltron. I don't know if you guys remember, but all the pieces come together to create an amazing, powerful machine. And through hearing what you guys are talking about, it's just ringing true to me. I want to thank you guys for, breaking down everything to me. I know this won't be our last podcast, but if you're an orthodontist and want to learn more about how P.O.P. can benefit your practice, connect with us. What is the best way right now, guys? Is it to go to the website? Is it through the Facebook group?
Yeah, through the website, I think is the easiest way to get us for sure.
And if it's a doctor, just reach out to any of us individually. If you go to my website and get my number, any of us would be happy to talk you through our experience and P.O.P. anytime. Absolutely.
P.O.P.-ortho.com. I want to thank you for tuning into today's episode. Special thanks to our guests, Dr. Scott Nord, Dr. Joe Feller, Dr. Blake Maxfield, and Dr. Bryan Horsley. Be sure to visit the website for more information. Join us next time on the P.O.P. Podcast, where we will continue to share valuable insights, foster a supportive community for orthodontists everywhere. And until then, keep smiling and keep striving for excellence. We'll see you next time. Orthodontists, listen up. Unlock a $5,000 digital marketing consultation, all for free, from P.O.P. partners Brain Bites Creative. Unlock this complimentary marketing strategy session led by my friend and dental marketing expert, Caroline Hosey. This is a rare opportunity offered exclusively for P.O.P. podcast listeners and partners. To book your free, no strings attached consult, email Caroline at brainbitescreative.com, or if you're watching this podcast, you You can scan the QR code at the bottom left of the screen, which will take you to Caroline's booking page. This is an amazing opportunity to get a full analysis of your website, digital marketing, SEO, social media, and even learn about the future of internet search and AI. Hit up Caroline today